There are mornings when the air feels heavier than it should, when your bones ache not from age but from warning. I had one of those mornings back in April of 1995, and I didn't listen. I told myself it was nothing. Just age. Just stress. But now, all these years later, I know, that was my body grieving in advance. Good morning, my friends. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm 73 years old, and today, I'm going to tell you a story I've never had the courage to speak aloud. It's the kind of story that stains the soul. But sometimes silence becomes heavier than truth. And if I don't release it now, it'll take the last of me. If you're listening, drop your city in the comments, and please like this video and subscribe to GranDiaries. I was born in a small coal mining town in West Virginia in 1952. My father was a mechanic who worked with grease-stained hands, but had the gentlest touch I ever knew. My mother baked bread every Saturday, made our clothes by hand, and taught me that family is everything. We weren't rich, but we were proud. We ate dinner together every night, even if it was just cornbread and beans. I used to think nothing could ever shatter a family like ours. I was wrong. I met Thomas Whitmore at the county fair when I was 17. He wasn't like the other boys. He was quiet, respectful, and awkward in the most endearing way. He asked me to dance, and his hands shook so bad I thought he might faint. I remember thinking, if this boy can barely touch my hand without trembling, he must have a heart made of gold. And he did, at least in the beginning. We courted for 2 years. He'd walk 5 miles just to bring me flowers from his grandmother's garden. We married in 1971 at the First Baptist Church. My mother made my dress. My father gave me away with tears in his eyes. We moved into a 2-room rental near the old mill where Thomas worked. It was noisy, drafty, and hot in the summer, but it was ours. We were happy. I didn't need a big house or fancy things. I had him. In 1973, our daughter Abigail was born, 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs strong enough to scare the neighbors. Thomas held her in his arms and whispered, "You're the reason I breathe now." He worked extra shifts, came home with sawdust in his hair and blisters on his palms, but he never complained. Every night he'd bring home something for Abigail, a ribbon, a leaf shaped like a heart, a story to make her giggle. We were a family. A real one. 5 years later, our son Caleb came along. He was a quiet baby, almost too quiet. He didn't cry much, just stared at the ceiling like he was already deep in thought. I used to think he was born old. Abigail adored him from the start. She carried him around like a living doll. They were close, closer than most siblings I'd seen. She taught him to read before he even started school. He'd listen to her like she was a prophet. Our life was full of the little things that make memories, the Sunday picnics, the rainy mornings in bed, the old radio humming gospel songs while I cooked. It wasn't perfect. Thomas and I had our spats. He worked too much. I felt unseen sometimes. But we always came back to each other. That's what love was, I thought. Commitment. But time is a sculptor, and not all changes are beautiful. By the time Caleb turned 12, something in him started to shift. He grew more distant, more withdrawn. He stopped laughing at Abigail's jokes. He started coming home late from school. Said he was just walking. I didn't think much of it. Boys change. Puberty. Hormones. The usual excuses. But Thomas noticed. And he didn't like it. That boy's going soft, he'd grumble, pulling off his boots. Needs discipline. Toughen him up. I didn't agree. Caleb wasn't like other boys, that's all. He was thoughtful, artistic, and sensitive. He'd draw pictures of trees, of faces he saw in crowds. There was one he drew of me folding laundry that made me cry. "He's not weak," I told Thomas once. "He's just feeling everything too deeply." Thomas scoffed. "That's exactly what'll break him in this world." I didn't realize how deep that disagreement would become, how it would slowly fracture our parenting, and eventually, our marriage. By the time Caleb was 14, the house felt different. Colder. Quieter. Thomas had taken a new job at the lumber mill. A better paycheck, but more dangerous. He came home exhausted, aching, irritated. Caleb would retreat to his room. Abigail had gone off to college by then, and without her buffer, the silence between father and son turned into tension. One night, I overheard them arguing in the garage. I couldn't make out the words, but the sound of something shattering followed by Caleb's footsteps storming off made my heart race. Thomas came in afterward, face flushed, hands trembling. He didn't speak, just went to bed. I found Caleb sitting in the backyard, staring at the moon. When I asked what happened, he said nothing, just shook his head and whispered, "He doesn't see me." He never did. I held him that night, tighter than I ever had before. And for a brief moment, I thought things would heal. I was wrong. 2 months later, on a warm spring morning, Thomas left for work like always. He kissed my forehead, said he'd be late because of a meeting. His boots hit the porch like they always did. That was the last time I saw him alive. The call came at 1:47 p.m. I still remember the exact time because I was hanging bed sheets outside, humming a hymn I hadn't sung since my own mother died. "Mrs. Whitmore?" The voice on the phone was official, sterile. "There's been an accident at the mill. We're sorry to inform you." I don't remember what was said after that. I remember the bedsheet slipping from my hand. The smell of sun-warmed cotton. The sky is so blue it hurts to look at. I remember my knees giving out on the back porch steps. And Caleb, running to me, shouting, "Mom, Mom, what's wrong?" But I couldn't speak. Not then. Not for hours. The days after Thomas's death blurred together like smudged ink on paper. People came and went. There were casseroles I never touched, condolences I couldn't bear to hear, and faces I hadn't seen in years crowding my living room with forced sympathy and the same rehearsed line. He was a good man. Yes, he was. And now he is gone. I remember sitting by the fireplace that night, still in my black dress, the scent of pine sap and iron dust clinging to it from the mill where Thomas had worked. Caleb hadn't said much all day. He barely ate, barely moved. He just sat in the corner like a shadow, his eyes hollow, as if someone had taken a spoon and scooped out his soul. I didn't know how to reach him. I didn't know how to reach myself. Abigail came home the next morning, suitcase in hand, eyes red and tired. She dropped everything and hugged me without a word. Her presence steadied me. We were now two women trying to hold the last piece of our family together. Caleb kept his distance. He was only 15, but he looked older, harder. He stood at Thomas's funeral like a statue, unblinking, unmoved, his jaw clenched so tight I thought it might crack. After the burial, he disappeared for hours. I found him behind the tool shed, sitting on an old tire, chain-smoking cigarettes he must have stolen. When I approached, he didn't look at me. He worked himself into the grave, he muttered. And for what? I knelt beside him, brushing the ash from his jacket. He did it for us, baby. He did it for you. For me. He scoffed, flicking the cigarette into the dirt. He hated me. I felt that sentence like a knife between my ribs. That's not true, Caleb. You don't know, he snapped. You were always busy making excuses for him. He's tired. He's stressed. He doesn't mean it. But he meant every damn thing he said to me. Every time he called me useless. Every time he looked at me like I was a mistake. I couldn't breathe. I wanted to argue, to defend the man I'd loved since I was 17. But I also knew deep down I had seen it too. The tension. The pressure. The words Thomas hurled when his body ached too much and his spirit was worn thin. Still, I believed, maybe foolishly, that love outweighed mistakes. That fatherhood wasn't erased by anger. Your father loved you, I whispered. He just didn't know how to show it. Caleb didn't respond. He got up, walked past me, and said over his shoulder, "Then maybe you didn't know him as well as you think." After the funeral, Abigail returned to college. She wanted to stay longer, but I insisted. She had a future to focus on. Besides, I told her, Caleb and I will be okay. I lied. The house was so quiet after she left. It felt haunted. I tried to carry on, cooking dinner, folding laundry, writing checks. But everything felt like an act. I was going through motions while something inside me slowly unraveled. And Caleb, he was unraveling faster. He stopped coming home on time. His grades slipped. Teachers called saying he hadn't turned in assignments. I found cigarettes in his jacket. One day, I caught him sneaking a bottle of bourbon from the back of the pantry. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He looked at me, eyes glassy, and said, "You really gonna play mother now?" That night, I sat in the kitchen and cried into my hands. The boy I gave birth to, the child who used to trace my freckles and ask if they were constellations, was now a stranger sleeping under my roof. And I didn't know how to bring him back. 3 months after Thomas's death, Caleb was suspended from school for fighting. He came home with blood on his knuckles and a cut on his lip. When I asked him what happened, he said, "Does it matter?" and slammed his door. I tried calling Abigail, but I didn't know what to say. "Your brother's falling apart?" That felt too vague. "I'm afraid of my own son?" That felt too real. I started locking my bedroom door at night. I told myself it was for safety. But deep down, I didn't believe he would ever hurt me. Not then. Not yet. One morning, I found a group of older boys sitting on our porch smoking. I didn't recognize them, but I knew the type, tattoos on their necks, hard eyes, loud laughter. One of them smirked when I asked where Caleb was. "He's with us now," Granny, the tallest, said. "He's growing up." I shut the door in their faces. That night, I begged Caleb to tell me what was going on. I told him I missed him, that I was worried. He stared at me for a long time, then said, "You're only worried because he's gone now. If Dad was still alive, you wouldn't even notice me." "That's not fair," I whispered. "I've always been here. I've always tried." "You let him destroy me," he snapped. "You let him grind me down until I hated myself. You watched and did nothing." "I didn't know how to stop it," I admitted. "Exactly," he said, and walked away. The next few weeks passed in a fog. Caleb came and went like a ghost. I barely saw him. When I did, he was colder, harder, angrier. Then came the day that broke me. April 28th, 1995. A Friday. It began like any other. I made coffee, toasted bread, put laundry in the washer. Caleb was gone when I woke up. I assumed he was at school. Around noon, I went into the hallway to clean. The bathroom door was closed, light on underneath. I knocked. No answer. I opened it. He wasn't alone. 4 boys stood inside, those same ones from the porch. Caleb stood in front of the mirror. staring at his reflection like he didn't recognize himself. Or maybe, like he did. Caleb, I asked, confused. What's going on? That's when he turned to me. His eyes. They weren't my son's eyes anymore. I didn't recognize the boy in front of me. Caleb stood with his hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight, and his reflection in the mirror staring back with something that wasn't pain or grief, it was rage. Cold, settled rage. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that waits to strike. Beside him stood 4 young men, boys, really, but with that empty-eyed hardness that made them seem older. I knew 2 of them from town. Troublemakers. One had been caught with a stolen bike last summer. Another had assaulted a gas station clerk. I always hoped Caleb would stay away from boys like them. I guess hope wasn't enough. What's going on here? I asked, stepping into the bathroom. None of them answered. I looked at my son, my child, the one I cradled through fevers and read bedtime stories to, and I said his name like a prayer, Caleb. He didn't speak. One of the boys behind him reached forward and shut the bathroom door, locking it with a soft click. That sound, that simple, quiet sound, will haunt me for the rest of my life. Keep your voice down, one of the boys said. Don't worry, another muttered. Nobody's gonna hear anything with the TV blasting. I backed up until my shoulders hit the tiled wall, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear their voices. What is this? I whispered. What are you doing? Caleb stepped toward me. You think you're innocent, he said slowly. But you're not. You never were. My hands trembled. Caleb, please, whatever you're angry about, we can talk. You're hurting. I know you are, but I'm still your mother. You stopped being my mother when you let him crush me. I stared into his eyes, and for a split second, I saw the little boy he used to be. The one who used to draw pictures of us holding hands. The one who cried when his pet rabbit died and asked if there was a heaven for animals. But just as quickly, that child was gone again. The first hit wasn't a punch. It was a shove. My back slammed against the wall hard enough to make me cry out. I tasted metal in my mouth. Then came the slap. Then another. I stumbled, dazed, trying to speak, trying to understand. My own son had just struck me. You made him work until he died, Caleb hissed. You drained him. You watched him fall apart and did nothing. You sat in this house like a queen while he broke his back for you. That's not true, I sobbed, holding my cheek. I loved your father. I never wanted. He cut me off with another blow, this time a fist to my ribs. I dropped to my knees, gasping, the wind knocked clean from my lungs. The other boys closed in. Some were smirking. One turned away, unable to watch. None of them stopped it. I tried to crawl, to reach the door. A boot pinned my hand to the floor. You women, he said, crouching in front of me. You all pretend you're victims. But you're the reason men suffer. You wear them down until they're hollow. I shook my head, coughing, blood trickling from my nose. I raised you, I whispered. I gave you everything I had. You gave me nothing, he spat. The next moments were a blur of pain and shame so deep I still can't name it aloud. My body was violated, but worse, my soul was shattered. The child I once fed with my own hands now tore me apart like I was nothing. Like I was the villain in his story. I begged. Not to be spared, but for him to stop, to remember who I was. Who he was. It didn't matter. When it was over, I lay crumpled on the cold tile floor, bleeding, shaking, trying to hide what was left of my body with what remained of my torn dress. The boys left one by one, silent now, maybe afraid of what they'd done. Caleb was the last. He bent down, looked me straight in the eyes, and whispered, "You should never have been my mother." And then he was gone. The door slammed. Silence fell. Real silence. The kind that screams in your ears. I couldn't move. I couldn't cry. I couldn't think. I could barely breathe. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. Outside, a bird chirped as if the world was still normal. But inside me, something had been permanently broken. It was hours later, how many, I'll never know, that I heard footsteps again. I tensed, terrified, expecting him to return and finish it. But it wasn't Caleb. It was Carol. Carol Bennett, my oldest friend. She'd come to bring soup. She let herself in through the back door when no one answered the front. "Eleanor," she called. "I brought that chowder you like, the one with the sweet corn." Then silence. She must have seen the blood on the hallway floor, the trail leading to the bathroom. When she opened the door and found me there, she dropped the thermos and screamed. I don't remember everything after that. I remember warm water. Carol gently cleaned my wounds. Her hands were shaking. I remember her asking who did this. I remember silence. Then, eventually, I whispered, "It was him." She went still. "Him. Caleb." Her breath caught in her throat. "No. No, Eleanor. That can't be. He's your son." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. My face, my arms, my torn clothes, they all spoke for me. "I'm calling the police," she said, reaching for the phone. No, my voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Please. Don't. Eleanor, he raped you. He beat you. This is a crime. He's still my son," I said, choking on the words. "And I can't survive watching him be taken away in handcuffs." Carol cried then. For me. For him. For everything that had been lost in that house. She stayed the night. Sat by my bed. Gave me a sedative. Held my hand while I drifted into sleep that wasn't rest, but escape. The next morning, the sun rose like it always did. But I was not the same woman who had kissed her husband goodbye 6 months ago. I was not even the woman who buried him. I was someone else now. Someone hollowed out, stitched back together with shame and silence. And I knew I had to leave. I left the next morning. Not with a bang, not with a confrontation. Just a small suitcase, a quiet note, and the shattered pieces of my soul tucked beneath a coat. I waited until Caleb left, probably to meet those boys again. I didn't look out the window. I didn't want to see him. Not after what he'd done. Not with his father's shadow still hanging over our porch. I packed only the essentials. A few clothes, my birth certificate, the deed to the house, a photograph of Thomas holding Abigail as a baby. I left behind the wedding album, the curtains I'd sewn by hand, and the blanket Caleb used to drag around as a toddler. Some memories are too heavy to carry. Before I closed the door behind me, I left a letter on the kitchen table. My handwriting shook with every stroke, but I needed him to see it. "Caleb, I don't know what I did to earn your hatred, but I cannot survive under the same roof as you. Not after what you did. You have one day to make rent arrangements. I will no longer support this house. I pray for your soul, but I cannot be near you anymore." That was all I had left to say. I took the early bus to Abilene, where Abigail lived. I didn't call her from the house. I was too afraid he'd overhear. I used a payphone 3 blocks away. She answered on the second ring. "Mom? Are you okay?" she asked immediately. Her voice cracked with worry. "No," I whispered. "But I will be. Can I stay with you for a while?" "You never have to ask," she said. "I'll be at the station." Her apartment was small, just 2 bedrooms shared with a roommate, but it felt like a castle to me. A fortress of warmth and safety. She gave me her bed and slept on the couch. When she asked what happened, I told her just enough to explain the bruises. Not everything. Some truths break hearts you're trying to protect. It was Caleb, I said. And his friends. He hurt me. She froze, her teacup shaking in her hands. What do you mean, he hurt you? I mean, it wasn't just fists. She dropped the cup. It shattered on the linoleum floor. In the months that followed, I tried to disappear. I found a small job folding fabric at a quilting shop. I stayed quiet. I woke early, cleaned obsessively, and cooked when no one was hungry. I flinched at every knock on the door. Abigail begged me to see a counselor. I refused. Until one day, I didn't. I had a panic attack at the grocery store. A boy with dark hair and a slouched posture walked by, and for a terrifying moment, I thought it was Caleb. I dropped a basket of oranges and collapsed to the floor. That night, I agreed. Her name was Dr. Lorraine Harper. She was in her 60s, with salt and pepper hair, and eyes that held a kind of worn gentleness. I didn't speak for the first 2 sessions. I just cried. She never pushed. She just waited. On the 3rd visit, I told her about the bathroom, the violence, the betrayal. I expected her to flinch. She didn't. You're still standing, she said simply. That tells me who you really are. I didn't believe her at first, but I kept going. Session after session. I spilled the grief, the guilt, the unbearable question. Where did I go wrong? Dr. Harper never tried to fix me. She helped me sit with the broken parts until they didn't scare me so much anymore. A year passed. Abigail graduated and started working at a law office. We moved to a better apartment. I got my own room with a window that looked out on the hills. I still thought about Caleb. Every day. At night. I dreamed of his laughter as a boy, his hand in mine crossing the street. I grieved him the way you grieve the dead. Because in every way that mattered, he was gone. Then, one spring morning in 2001, I got a letter. The envelope was worn. The return address was a correctional facility upstate. I stared at it for nearly an hour before I opened it. It was from Caleb. His handwriting was different now, more rigid, but it was his. I recognized the way he curled his R's. Mom, I know you don't want to hear from me. I don't blame you. I'm in prison. Armed robbery. 10 years. I've had time to think. Too much time. What I did, that day, I can't even begin to explain. I don't expect forgiveness. But I needed you to know, I remember what I did. I remember your face. I hear your cries in my dreams. And I hate who I became. You always said we have choices. I made mine. And it cost me everything. I'm sorry, Mom. Not because I want your love again. I know I lost that. But because you didn't deserve what I did to you. Even if I'm nothing to you now, you will always be my mother. I folded the letter. Then I wept. I didn't write back. 2 months later, a chaplain from the prison called. Caleb had been stabbed in a fight. He didn't survive. They asked if I wanted the body. I said no. But I did send one thing, a white flower. A single lily. The same kind I placed on Thomas's grave. Not for who Caleb became, but for who he once was. The years continued. Abigail married a good man named Marcus. She had 2 children, Rose and Elijah. They saved me. Those children became my joy, my reason to keep getting out of bed. I never told them about their uncle. To them, he was a distant relative who moved away and never came back. I couldn't give them the truth. Not yet. Maybe never. But I did give them what I'd once lost, the tenderness, the stories, the patience. I made cookies with Rose every Sunday. I taught Elijah how to stitch a button. Abigail once told me, "You're the best part of their childhood, Mom." I think that's when I finally allowed myself to believe I hadn't failed completely. Now, at 73, I sit on this porch with my tea and watch the sun rise over hills that once seemed so far away. I've lost many things, my husband, my home, my son, but I've gained a different kind of strength. One that comes from surviving the things no one should ever have to survive. People say forgiveness sets you free. But I don't know if that's true for everyone. I never forgave Caleb. But I stopped letting him own my pain. I gave that pain a place. And then I grew something beside it. If you've listened this far, thank you. Thank you for holding space for a story that's not easy to hear. A story that many women carry but never speak aloud. If you're out there struggling, hurting, surviving, I want you to know something. You are not what was done to you. You are what you choose to build from the ruins. And you are never as alone as you think. Please leave a comment below. Let me know which city you're listening from. And if you found any piece of this story meaningful, subscribe to GranDiaries. Because every story matters. Even the ones that hurt. Especially the ones that hurt.